he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Man 100 back again, another episode of How's My Team. We've got a shorter week this week to talk about a few games. Obviously, we've got the Giants up against the Collingwood Magpies. We've got the Titans in their first home game of the season against the Dragons. We've also got the Wanderers women playing their last game of the season against Wellington Phoenix. And then other than that, we've got Liverpool women playing tonight in the Merseyside Derby. We've got the Cubs in miscellaneous stuff, with the end of their spring training and the start of the actual MLB season. Apart from that, obviously international fixtures are happening, so obviously no Wanderers men's team playing and no Liverpool men's team playing. So it's probably going to be a lighter episode on stuff, but let's get started with the episode anyway. Alright, and it feels weird because we're starting with the Giants this morning. Usually we start with like Liverpool, we start with like the Wanderers or something like that. But we're actually starting with the Giants. They obviously were playing in Melbourne. They played against Collingwood Magpies. Obviously, traditionally the last couple of years we've obviously played them in opening round and we've smashed them both times. But it was a 33-point loss to the Giants away from home to Collingwood. 87-54 was the final score. 13 goals 9 to 7 goals 12. And that was one of the reasons why we kind of got pumped a little bit, is our inaccuracy in front of goal. What also didn't help is the fact that Collingwood did score 5 goals 1 to 2 goals 5 in the first quarter. So it kind of gave us a bit of a shift in the wrong direction very early on. I think there was some shots on goal throughout the entire game, but even in the first quarter, there could have possibly been goals and made things a little bit closer. It was a little bit closer in the second quarter. It was only 1 goal 2 to the Collingwood Magpies. It was 2 goals 1 to the Giants. So it ended up being a 9-point margin at halftime. So relatively it was down. I think they were down by like 20-30 points towards the end of the first quarter. I think it was like 20 odd points. But getting it back to 9 points, I was like, oh, it's going to make a big game here. And relatively at the start of the third quarter, was looking very good for the Giants, and then Collingwood just put the pressure on and just turned it around. It was 3 goals 2 in the third quarter compared to 1 goal and 4 behinds for the Giants. And then Collingwood finished things off with 4 goals and 4 behinds compared to 2 goals 2 in the last for the Giants. So under the lid of Marvel, they lost by 33 points. At this point in time on the ladder, the Giants dropped down to 14th position as well, which doesn't help things. Obviously, with Geelong ended up getting a win on Thursday night as well, so that kind of shifts things around. So we're just hanging on outside of the bottom 4 at the present moment, and I think that bye, which happens next week, has come in a perfect time because we need to reset. We need to have some troops back. I think we're supposed to have Toby Bedford back for this game, but he was in a mission. I'm not sure why, whether he was injured or whether they just didn't think that they needed him. But injuries have been hitting us really, really hard since opening round. Obviously, we got Finn Callaghan back, playing well. But there wasn't a lot of highlights in the games, to be honest. Our efficiency, disposal efficiency was good. Our efficiency inside of 50 was a little bit less than Collingwood, but they were just under pressure the entire way. In terms of goals for the Giants, top scorer was Jake Stringer with 2. Phoenix Goddard got another goal, so he's actually played relatively well since he's actually debuted. He's actually scored 4 or 5 goals in his first couple of games, so pretty impressive from Phoenix. Obviously, only just debuting this season, so getting a few goals on the board with games is pretty damn good. Toby Green with 1, Max Krewski with 1, Jake Riccardi scored our 3rd or 4th goal. That's the only one that I actually did see the Giants actually score, because the game was going on and I was just on a break, on my last break of my shift from last night, around the time that the game was, I think, towards the end of the first quarter. So wasn't turning out great. And then the other player that did score was Harry Thomas as well. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are happening. Jesse Hogan was woeful in front of goal. 0 goals, 1 behind. Did see the 1 behind in the late in the third quarter, but it just wasn't great. Clayton Oliver with a behind, Xavier Halloran with a behind. Yeah, and then we're getting pressure towards the back line, which is not helping things as well. I think part of that obviously is with the midfield, obviously having a lot of players out in the midfield in terms of Tom Green being out. We've obviously got Josh Kelly, who's usually around that mix there. He's out as well. Obviously, Toby Bedford would have been in there. He would have been around the ruck in the midfield. Probably would have played a bit better. But I can't say anything against like the debuting players and the young Giants coming through that played in this game, because they did the best that they could. Obviously going up against some superstars. Obviously, Collingwood had some troops come back. I believe Darcy Moore definitely was back. I think Jeremy Howe was supposed to be back as well. I don't know if he was. I'm just going to go through the list of players. But I know that obviously Darcy Moore was back. It doesn't look like he was back. But yeah, so at least Darcy Moore was back for this game, so that was obviously going to bulk up Collingwood's defense a little bit in terms of things. But there's not much that we can say when it comes to that. You just got to have the break of the Giant, for the bye for the Giants. But I have a feeling that they're probably not going to have a full week off because obviously they need to get into training. They need to look at footage, and then they kind of need to look at themselves because obviously the next time they play is the 12th of April, so just after Easter, for Gather Round. So we play at Barossa Park in South Australia, so we need to, and we're up against the Tigers. This is technically a home game for us as well, so it's technically a home game that's gone away from obviously NG Stadium, and obviously Canberra as well. In fact, the next home game after that is at Canberra against North Melbourne. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, in between that, obviously it's the first Sydney Derby of the week of the season at the SCG. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But honestly, a little bit disappointing. Obviously not 81-point loss like it was to the Bulldogs, but obviously having that, then obviously the 4-point loss last week, and then a 33-point loss this week's not helping our percentage, and these injuries are really hitting us hard. Honestly, as I thought, like in the first half of the season, if we can get a few wins on the board, say if we get, if we're by what round, when's mid, if we're around round 15 and we've got like say 7 wins probably at half, because obviously we got the bye in there, and obviously we got the round 13 bye as well. If we're around about 7 wins in that middle section, I think we're going to be okay with some players obviously coming back after the first half of the season. Obviously, by the time I think the bye is done, we probably should have like Toby Bedford back, if he's back proper. Possibly Brent Daniels as well. I'm not sure in terms of his injury on how he's going, but I assume that we'd have a few players back after the bye for gather round, if not obviously for that game against Sydney, which is obviously the 17th. It'd be interesting to see what happens with that, but yeah. Obviously we can't look at it, just move on. Obviously just got to look into, the loss a little bit. I think we're getting dominated in the midfield. I think it's probably one of the issues. Which, again, like I said, in the St Kilda game, St Kilda were under pressure by Melbourne in the midfield in their round one clash. So I don't understand on the fact that obviously the pressure is in the midfield against St Kilda, and they didn't really do that. They didn't really do that until like the last quarter, which obviously that sparked a comeback relatively well, and obviously they could have lost. Giants could have lost by a hell of a lot more, but obviously losing by 4. It's one of those things where we just kind of get dominated in the midfield, and then obviously with the players that are out, it's not helping a lot of things because obviously it's not the first choice players against first choice players in the teams, and I get that. You're going to get that sometimes. Obviously the injuries do happen, but with so many first choice players being out with long injuries as well. Obviously Tom Green being out for the entire season, Josh Kelly most likely being for the most of the season. We won't get Darcy Jones back until late in the second half of the season as well, obviously with his injury in that elimination final against Hawthorn last season. Brent Daniels has been in and out of the side, but he was out for most of last season as well. Some of these injuries coming in and being big ones at that is not helping the team, and honestly I don't know where they're going to sit, whether they're going to sit in the top 10 or they're just going to miss out. I have no idea, but the start of the season is not looking great after a great opening round game, 3 losses on the trot, heading into the bye. Probably a good time for the bye, but in saying that, obviously all eyes are on gather round, obviously South Australia, and the game against Richmond on the 12th of April on the Saturday. We'll see what happens with that, because Richmond at this point haven't won a game yet. Obviously they still got to play this week, I believe, so we'll see if they end up getting a win, but obviously it's going to be very crucial clash, because this is a team that is struggling a little bit, and if we can get some wins against some teams that are struggling around our position, if not maybe a couple of positions higher than us, if we can get some wins on the board with that, then that will help us in the long run. I think that'll help us with a lot of points, especially when we get more and more players back as the season goes on. But any early wins we can bank is going to help us in a lot of regards to fighting for at least a wildcard spot, if not obviously in that top 8 proper. So we'll see what happens. Alright, Sunday morning, and I know some people are going to say, what am I going to talk about, considering that Liverpool and the Wanderers men's team are both not playing, because obviously the Wanderers women play later today, and the Titans also play tonight as well. So what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about Liverpool in general. I'm just going to talk about the women, as well as obviously the Liverpool legends. Obviously, during the international break, sometimes every single year, legends of the Liverpool Football Club will play a club like legends of another club. This year it was Borussia Dortmund, so it was 2-2 in that game. I think they have, in terms of Liverpool players, Steven Gerrard's in there, Thiago was in there, he scored as well, so it's a charity match, which is pretty cool. They do it every single year at Anfield. It's great. So Thiago ended up scoring, and Jay Spearing also scored. It was pretty good. Like I like the fact that it is a situation where Clubs like Liverpool can get like legends together to play for charity in general, and people can go watch at Anfield. It's great because that's something that obviously matters in the community, and obviously charity does matter, and obviously they don't have to do it. Like obviously when it comes to Liverpool legends, like there's only like a few players that might play, but when it comes down to it, you don't have to play for it, but obviously it's for charity, so you kind of want to do it just to, feel good as well as just in general. It's great for that. But obviously, just thought I'd mention that. Usually I'd mention that in the miscellaneous stuff, but I kind of don't want to forget about that. The main thing that I want to talk about is I want to give a segment to the Liverpool women's team this week, because obviously the men are not playing this week, obviously with the international break, as well as obviously more World Cup qualifiers, obviously considering that some of them are not finished yet, obviously in Europe. The last lot of confirmations in terms of places in the World Cup. I was trying to think of what the word would be. Won't play until Tuesday, Wednesday, so it won't be until the 1st of April. So we won't know that result for those obviously until next week. But we'll talk about the Wanderers women's team because obviously it was Merseyside Derby, so big occasion for them. Obviously this is another reason why I wanted to give it a segment because obviously, Merseyside Derby, we've got one for the men in a few weeks' time. And it ended up being a 3-2 win for Liverpool, so that means Liverpool have won another game this year, another game this season in terms of the Women's League after being pretty far down on the table. They've won 3 games out of the last 6 or 7, I think, so that's relatively good. Yeah, so it's 3-2 win in the Merseyside Derby. The problem was that Liverpool did lead 3-0 at half-time, so obviously I fell asleep, I crashed asleep over the second half, so I didn't actually see what the result was going to be. But Seri Holland, I believe that's how it's pronounced, Ceri. I would imagine that would be Seri or Sherry, something like that. I know there's obviously extra letters in that, but the English language is hard, dude. She scored a double. She scored in the 11th minute and the 41st minute. I think she might have been involved, or Grace Fisk might have been involved in the second goal around the 20th minute, but obviously Fernandez ended up scoring an own goal in that, so obviously counts as an own goal. But I think that Grace Fisk might have been involved in that. I'm not sure. So it's 3-0 at halftime. You'd say almost the game would be over at that point. But Everton came back. They scored in the 64th minute and the first minute of stoppage time. But obviously there was a few yellow cards around the place. But obviously in the end, huge 3 points to Liverpool. So it makes sure that obviously they don't go to the bottom of the ladder, because now it's 8 points between Liverpool in 10th position with 17 and Leicester City with 9. So that's great, but it also puts us 5 points in front of West Ham in 11th position. So we can't, and West Ham at 12 points. But they do have obviously a game in hand, but in saying that, it will be 4 points is the difference between the two results if West Ham do end up winning. So it makes it very much a lot easier for Liverpool in general to stay outside of those bottom 2 positions, which is great for that club. Arsenal, with 2 games in hand, they still got to play a game against I think Leicester City and Brighton. They jump into second position in front of Man United. Man United did lose 3-0 in the Manchester Derby. And obviously Arsenal beat Tottenham in the North London Derby as well. So big Derby day for 6 clubs, obviously, 3 matches. But yeah, Liverpool women winning 3-2 over Everton in the Merseyside Derby. Hopefully that's a good sign for the men. And the men can do the same, but we'll see what happens with that. But obviously I think Chelsea's still got to play, London City's still got to play, West Ham has still got to play, and Aston Villa has still got to play. So we'll see what that table is like, but it'll probably be mostly the same. If London City, I think, or Aston Villa do win, they could jump Everton into 6th position at this point in time. So, a lot of things happening in and around the league, but 3-2 win for the Liverpool women, and we'll obviously have the men back on Saturday this coming week. So we'll see what happens with that, and it's very late on Saturday, so we'll be talking about that on Sunday next week. But yeah, obviously some big games ahead in terms of the Wanderers women, and obviously the Titans as well. First home game for the Titans. So yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. In fact, it'll be the next segment. Alright, Monday morning. So we'll start with the Wanderers women. As I did say in the last segment with the Liverpool women's team, obviously wanted to give them a segment because obviously they were playing, and obviously the men weren't. So I thought I'd just give them a segment, plus obviously Merseyside Derby, as I said in that previous segment. Obviously the last game of the season for the Wanderers, obviously they have, the Wanderers women have the bye next week, so of this week coming. So the last round of the season, they won't be playing, so this was their last game of the season, obviously up against Wellington Phoenix. Wellington Phoenix being in second, fighting for a spot for the premiership, and it looked like at the start of the weekend it was not going to be a great result for us, because there was other results that didn't go our way leading into this game, and I was like, oh, please tell me that we actually just come away with some points here. And we come away with all 3 points, because we ended up winning 1-0 over Wellington away from home. So in our last game of the season, we ended up getting another win. So we've won against first place in Melbourne City. We've won against them once this season. We beat, obviously, second place in Wellington Phoenix in one of their games this season. And obviously drew with third place with Canberra United when they were hitting their straps and being on top of the table and stuff. So we've won some good games against some good sides, which is obviously, it's a massive turnaround since they complained quite a few weeks ago before obviously the start of 2026, and that the Wanderers just needed to do things differently, needed to take accountability and really improve. And they've done that in a lot of space. They've lost a few games obviously here and there. There's been some heavy defeats as well in some of the games as well. But ultimately they've actually been really competitive in pretty much most of their games in 2026, the 2026 part of the 2025-26 season. So I can't be too upset with that. Yuan Kong ended up scoring in the 78th minute. She tried to volley over the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper did hit the ball. It did hit her gloves, but unfortunately she batted it back instead. It actually paddled off her gloves instead of her catching it. So Yuan Kong just ended up putting it in the net in the bottom corner, which was great. So ultimately with that, that's the 3 points that is very crucial for the Wanderers, and I'll tell you why. Because earlier in the weekend, Sydney FC ended up winning in the Big Blue against Melbourne Victory. So they ended up winning 2-1 on Saturday. It was the last game on Saturday, so I was like, oh boy, we're in a situation where Sydney FC have gotten a win. We got to get a win now to get in front of them, because there were 2 points in front of the Wanderers at that point in time. Now we're still a point in front of them. Now, in saying that, obviously our season's done, so getting wooden spoon is kind of half out of our hands right now. We've done the best that we could. Obviously we won our last game to get over the hump, but obviously Sydney FC has still got a game to go. They've got a game in the season to go. Obviously we've got the bye, and what is going against us in this point in time is the fact that we've also conceded 5 more goals compared to Sydney FC. We've scored the same amount of goals. Both teams have scored the same amount of goals all season with 18 so far. But we've conceded 34 and they've conceded 29. So if they do end up getting a draw in their next game, which is this coming week, they will overtake us and we will be on the bottom with the wooden spoon. We have won one more game compared to Sydney FC. It's just Sydney FC have drawn 2 extra games in that situation. So they've kind of split the points there and we've lost 2 more games compared to them. Now, it's not all easy for Sydney FC because they go up against Central Coast Mariners, which at this point in time, Central Coast are in 6th position. But in saying that, they did draw obviously to Canberra United, which obviously forced Canberra United into 3rd place. So as of the table right now, it's Melbourne City on top on 37 points. They are premiers. They won the premiership plate, obviously with the loss for Wellington, because Wellington are in 2nd place with 31 points. So they can't be knocked off top spot. So they've won the premiership plate for the 3rd year running, which is crazy. You think in a competition, especially after last season being undefeated during the regular season, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, Wellington obviously with 31. Canberra United with that draw also go to 31 points. It's just obviously the goal difference there being the difference between Wellington and Canberra United. Obviously that Wellington win earlier a few weeks back against Sydney FC definitely helped with that, because obviously Wellington are on 36 goals for and 17 goals against compared to 29 goals for and 22 against for Canberra United. So, massive difference there. 4th place is Adelaide United on 30 points. Brisbane Roar in 5th position with 28. And Central Coast Mariners rounding out the top 6 with 27. Though, in saying that, with the draw, obviously, that Mariners ended up having, it's given a chance to Melbourne Victory in 7th position with 25 points, giving them a sniff. Obviously, Perth Glory on 24 points in 8th position, so they could also jump in. That they'd have to swing a whole lot. They're mathematically can make it, but their goal difference is leaving a lot to be desired because they've got -9 compared to a lot of the other teams. So Mariners and Victory would have to lose in front of them to jump in. At this point in time, obviously with a draw, Newcastle have been eliminated from finals contention. They're on 23 points in 9th position. So even if they made up the win, unfortunately they'd be on 26 points, and obviously Mariners are on 27. So bit of a bad situation for them, obviously. But obviously the Wanderers on 19 points in 10th position and Sydney FC in 11th with 18. So it's not going to be easy for Sydney FC because Mariners obviously will want to consolidate their spot in the top 6. Obviously with a win, they'll jump into 30 points. And with the table as it is right now, they jump into 4th position, even in 3rd position, obviously with Adelaide United having a 0 goal difference after everything. But Adelaide United play Wellington. Obviously Wellington don't really have to win that game, but obviously they'll probably want to be in the top 2, because at least that would confirm that they would have a home final. Perth Glory obviously against Victory. Victory will want to win that away from home in Perth. Obviously Central Coast are playing at home against Sydney FC, so that's also another big game for them. And then Canberra United also playing at home against Brisbane Roar, so that is a huge clash there. That's 3rd versus 5th. It's one of the games of the round, basically, I think, right there. And then obviously Melbourne City are playing away from home in Maitland against Newcastle. So obviously when it comes to Sydney FC, obviously they play against the Mariners. All they have to do is get a draw to avoid the wooden spoon. If they do not get any points from the game coming up, they will end up getting their wooden spoon. And the Wanderers will just sneak out like the Titans did last season. They would just sneak away from the wooden spoon on literally the last weeks of the season. In fact, actually, it's their last. Like, obviously, the Wanderers, it's their last week of the season. But we'll see what happens with the results. Obviously, I'll give an updated updated table when it comes to the Wanderers women and the A-League women competition next week. But obviously, we're back with the Wanderers coming up this week in the men's competition. They will play on Saturday. So Saturday night, they'll play their next game, and obviously that is against Melbourne City, which is not going to be easy. Obviously, Wanderers on the bottom, 2 points adrift from Perth Glory at the bottom at the moment, and obviously Melbourne City are in 9th place on 26. So ultimately, if we do end up getting a win over Melbourne City, it'll jump us to 24 points. And depending on how good, if we don't concede, but how many goals we do end up getting, could possibly jump into 10th position with Brisbane Roar. If Brisbane do get belted heavily, which they play Sydney FC. So Sydney FC at home, Brisbane, so they play at Suncorp. So it'll be interesting to see what the result will be for that, because that's a Thursday game as well for Sydney FC. Obviously leading into the Sydney Derby coming up on next Saturday. So that's going to be interesting for them. Jets obviously play Macarthur. Macarthur obviously won against Auckland FC in their last game. Auckland FC are away to Adelaide against United. Central Coast at home against Perth. Obviously, Wanderers play away to Amy Park, obviously in Melbourne, and then Victory playing at home against Wellington Phoenix. So, a lot of results around the mix. Obviously, we'll talk about the Wanderers men, but a 1-0 win in the last game of the season against, obviously, a really, really tough opponent in Wellington Phoenix in the women's competition. Great result for them. Obviously, one hand is off the wooden spoon right now, but the chances of not getting it are not in our hands right now. Obviously, we're barracking for the Mariners next week to get all 3 points. If they can win, the Mariners can win by a hefty margin as well, then we're set. They have to win by at least 1 goal, obviously, but heavy defeat with Sydney FC put to the sword by the Mariners would be great too. But 1-0 win, obviously, with Wellington Phoenix. We did all that we could do for the season to try and get away from the wooden spoon, and now it's up to chance now, and obviously all faith going into the Mariners against Sydney FC on Saturday. Alright, let's try this again. I didn't realise I didn't put the charger on. I had it plugged into the camera, but I did not turn it on from the PowerPoint. So let's do this again with the Titans, because obviously it cut out relatively early in the clip, but I didn't notice, and I was probably talking for about 5-10 minutes. In fact, it was probably 10-15 minutes, as it usually is. But obviously, Titans, first game at home of the season for them. Obviously 0-3 going into this game. Very early SpoonBowl game, because obviously the Dragons were also 0-3 in a close one as well. In fact, they've actually kind of mirrored our season a little bit themselves in some form or fashion. Obviously not with their last game of the season, because obviously they lost by 10, I think, in their last game compared to us, where we lost by a decent chunk. But obviously early SpoonBowl game, obviously yes, last week was a SpoonBowl game as well, but obviously the competition very early, still trying to work things out. But obviously 0-3 for both teams, a team looking to get a win. And at home, it was the Titans that got the win, first win in feels like 9 months, but I'm sure it's probably less than that, but I'm not sure what the stat is. But 22 points to 14 ended up being the final score overall, though we were behind at halftime. We could have been tied up at halftime, could have been 12 all or 12-10, but there was a try that was disallowed by an obstruction on Bo Firma, so AJ Brimson didn't end up getting the try out of it. They scored relatively early in the game, halfway through the 3rd minute. Tyrell Sloan, who'd just come back into the side, Obviously watched him in the New South Wales Cup game against Melbourne when I watched, obviously, the Dragons and Melbourne game a couple of weeks back. He scored a few tries in that. Back in the side, scored on the wing, and then converted to make it 6-0 within 5 minutes. Then Philip Sami got an intercept, run 90 metres down to score his try, and it was converted by Jaden Campbell late in the 10th minute. Then no scores for a little while, and then off a Keanu Kinney error in terms of catching at the back, and it's been an issue that has been plaguing him for a lot of the season so far. Knocked it on, and Damien Cook ended up with the ball, eventually going over the try line to make it 10-6. Obviously, with conversion, make it 12-6 early in the 27th minute. Then, obviously, there was an obstruction called on Bo Firma, but obviously AJ went to an attempt to score a try in the corner on the left side since he was playing in centre this week, which could have at least been a two-point advantage to the Dragons, if not obviously all tied up at halftime. Then it was a 2-on-1 strip very early in the second half, halfway through the 44th minute, with a penalty shot made by Valentine Holmes. But that was all the points that the Dragons ended up scoring, because a couple of minutes later, very early in the 47th minute, Aaron Mahau gets put through by Jaden Campbell, and he scores with the conversion making it 14 points to 12. Then a few things happen throughout the night after that. Obviously, Oliver Pascoe, he was a debuting player in this game, which is great for him. Obviously, he's been knocking on the door a bit over the last little while, but obviously he did end up getting put in. Then there was a leg pull penalty very late in the game, just before the 70th minute. And Jaden Campbell makes the penalty shot to tie it up at 14 with just under 10 to go. And then, obviously, Aaron Mahau scores his second try, breaks through, gets put through by a great play from Kinney. Also, I believe Jaden Campbell was also involved in the play as well. Jojo, I think, was also on that side, also involved in the play, but put him through, fucking fended off Clint Gufferson with one hand, ball in the other, runs down probably about 50-60 metres, scores a try, converted to be 20 points to 14 up. And then obviously there was a penalty with a line dropout being conceded very late, I think 40 seconds left, and it didn't go 10 metres. So Oliver Pascoe ended up having the penalty shot to make it 22 points to 14, the final score. So with that makes sure that the Titans are off the bottom of the ladder. They do move into 16th position, so they only move one position, obviously 1 point being the difference between 15th and 16th right now, which is a bit of a pain. But the only two teams that have not won a game so far this season is the Sea Eagles. They're in 14th, but they do have 2 points, obviously, with the round 2 bye. That's probably the only thing that's helped them at this point in time. Obviously, for and against has probably helped as well, but they've played one less game, and obviously the Dragons, obviously they're 0-4 going into their next game, obviously at home at Cogra against the Cowboys. But obviously with the table, the Panthers are on top, 4-0. They haven't lost yet, and they conceded only 30 points so far this season, but they do have the Storm in a big clash on Friday night, I think it is. So, huge clash for them. The Warriors went down to the Tigers at home, but the Warriors are still in second position. Tigers move up to third position. Knights with a good win against the Bulldogs with a few players out, so they move into fourth position. Rabbitohs had the bye, so they move into fifth position, and then Bulldogs drop to sixth. Storm down to seventh position, which is an uncharted territory, especially this early in the season for them. Then 8th position, rounding out the top 8, is the Dolphins. They went down pretty close to Brisbane in the Battle of Brisbane. Though it's weird, some people saying that derby is bigger than, obviously, the grudge match between the Rabbitohs and the Roosters, considering that the Rabbits and the Roosters went down to the wire, but have had the history of well over 100 years playing each other in the competition. So, weird take. I definitely don't agree. I feel like when it comes to the Battle of Brisbane, there's quite a few derbies in front of it. I think it's up there, but obviously I feel like even it's not the best Queensland derby, because that's obviously the Cowboys and the Broncos. Even saying that as a Titans fan, I know that obviously the Titans, playing either of those teams has not been great for both of them in both regards, and obviously playing the Dolphins, they've been very inconsistent against the Dolphins too. But yeah, weird take. But we'll continue with the table. Obviously, the Sharks in 9th with a win. Broncos also in 10th position. Cowboys in 11th with a win over Melbourne, which put Melbourne down to 7th position. So a lot of upsets this week, which has been weird. Obviously the Sharks went down to Canberra. They won. Broncos obviously wasn't really an upset, but obviously the Tigers winning against the Warriors, the Knights winning against the Bulldogs, Cowboys beating Storm. There's quite a few games that went not how we expected, but yeah, Cowboys in 11th, Roosters in 12th position, 13th position is the Eels, 14th position is the Seagulls, 15th is Canberra, 16th is the Titans, and 17th is the Dragons. Next week, on Saturday, coming up, late game on Saturday, it's the Titans up against the Broncos at home. So we play them in the Gold Coast, so great situation for them. If there is a situation where we can win against the Broncos, I'm hoping it will be this time in the season. I would love it to be later in the season as well, but I feel like with the Broncos being up and down, obviously they've won 2 games, but they lost their first 2 games, and obviously all preseason they're a bit up and down all over the place as well. We could possibly get a win if we do fix a lot of things up. Our defense is decent. Obviously, we haven't conceded the most points all season so far. That's obviously the Eels. At this point, they've got 152 in total. We only have 112. So I think we're tied for 4th worst. I think 12th, 13th. So because we're tied with the Cowboys, the Dragons have conceded 1 more point than we have. Then both the Roosters and the Raiders have conceded 116 points. And obviously with the Eels almost conceding 50 again against Penrith, they're at 152 at this point in time. So we're not out of the woods yet, but we're not in a bad spot in terms of conceding points. Our defense has been relatively okay, but we do need to fix up the errors that we did have. There was a lot of errors in that game. In fact, even looking at the stats list for the teams, 78% completion rate for the Dragons, 73% for the Titans. If I scroll down to the errors, there was 24 in the game in terms of errors, 13 to the Titans, 17 penalties conceded, 10 to Titans, 7 to the Dragons, 7 ruck infringements, 5 obviously being the majority to the Dragons, 4 penalties inside the 10 metres, 3 conceded by the Dragons, 2 on reports, 1 apiece there. I believe it was Mo with a high shot that was on report for that, I believe, off the top of my head, pretty sure. But our defense has been solid, but we do need to fix up those errors because the Broncos will not take things lightly. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they look over us and be like, oh yeah, we'll move on to the next game. Yeah, we'll win against the Titans, overlooking us and end up getting a win from behind or something like that. For the Titans, that would be great to kind of shove in their faces. And then obviously play the Eels in Parramatta, followed by a trip to New Zealand, to Auckland to play the Warriors before the round 8 bye. So pretty interesting month of April coming up for us. But obviously, all things considered, 22 points to 14 being the final score. First win of the season for the Titans. Great result for them. Fantastic. Kind of ends the week on a really good note. So now we'll go over some miscellaneous stuff. Obviously, I want to talk about the table. Obviously, we'll talk about the AFL because obviously all the games are done. And the Giants now move into 15th position. So they drop into the bottom 4 with percentage, with only Carlton, who were leading heavily in their game. They scored the first 7 goals and they end up losing pretty heavily. They lost by but they shouldn't have lost that game, to be fair. They scored the first 7 goals, I think, very early in the second quarter. I think the Demons only had 1 point to their name, and they ended up winning the game. So Carlton under us, then Essendon move up to 17th position, Richmond drop to 18th, but it's only because I believe with the Bombers, they scored more points so far than Richmond have. So their percentage is a little bit better than Richmond. Richmond just didn't score. But in terms of the table, Gold Coast Suns on top with 12, then followed by Western Bulldogs also on 12 in second. Third position is Fremantle. Then fourth is Sydney Swans. Fifth is Hawthorn. Sixth is North Melbourne. Seventh is Collingwood, obviously with a win over the Giants. Eighth position is Melbourne, the Melbourne Demons. Ninth position is West Coast Eagles. They won against Port Adelaide very early yesterday, so great job for them. Some people didn't even think they were going to win 1, let alone 2 games. But they're in 9th position at the moment, which is great for them. And rounding out the wildcard spots in 10th position is Geelong. 11th is Port Adelaide. 12th is Adelaide. 13th, with the first win of their season, is Brisbane, the Brisbane Lions. 14th is St Kilda, Giants in 15th, Carlton in 16th, Essendon 17th, and Richmond in 18th, leading into the bye for the Giants. So they possibly could drop even further down the table, but obviously we'll play Richmond at Gather Round on the 12th of April. So that's their next game. Obviously, the Wanderers men obviously play against Melbourne City. They play on Saturday. Liverpool obviously in competition with the FA Cup. FA Cup quarterfinal against Melbourne. That's Melbourne. I've done it the other way this time. Manchester City, rather. So they play on Saturday morning, I believe. And then the women play their FA Cup competition against Charlton Athletic very late on Sunday. So we'll be talking about that on Monday/Tuesday. But yeah, very late on Saturday for me. They'll be playing Manchester City, the men's, and Charlton Athletic for the women's in FA Cup competitions. We'll go with the Cubs because obviously their season had started now. They've played the first 3 games of the season so far. And not ideal in terms of the standings. Obviously, we'll go over the rest of spring training. Go back like a week because just trying to go through all the results. They ended up beating the Mariners 7-1. They shut out the Cubs, shut out the Brewers rather in preseason, 12 runs to nothing. Then won against the Yankees, 15 runs to 6 before losing the last game of spring training, 8-3 to the Yankees. The Yankees are 2-0, I believe. Actually, where are we? That's today's. So far, with the results, the Cubs lost the first game, 10 runs to 4 against the Nationals. Then they won 10 runs to 2 yesterday against the Nationals, and then lost this morning 6 runs to 3. So they're behind by 1. They're -1 in terms of runs on the board right now, and sitting 4th in their division right now, with the Brewers sitting on top with 3 wins, no losses. Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals in 2nd, Cincinnati Reds in 3rd, Pittsburgh Pirates down the bottom, despite winning today, on the bottom of the division. But obviously going up, we do play against the Angels, tomorrow, at, I believe that's at Wrigley. Yeah, it's at Wrigley. So play the Angels, back-to-back nights. Actually, we play them 3 weeks back-to-back. So we play 3 games back-to-back, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for me. And then we'll have the week off, we'll have a day off on the 2nd, before playing away from home. It'll be our first away game to the Guardians. So, yeah, not ideal, obviously, from the Cubs, obviously, but there's been a few home runs. Obviously, Ian Happ's got a couple. Alex Bregman got a couple today, so he's on the board as well. But we've done relatively okay. I think that we need to get a few more runs on the board. And our pitching, especially today, conceding 3 runs in the first inning to start off the game does not help. But apart from that, obviously they only conceded 3 more runs after that, 2 in the 8th as well, which didn't help things very late in the game. But, what can you do with the Cubs? But, just got to look forward. The Nationals looking like they were going to be a side that was basically, some people said, oh yeah, it's basically like the White Sox of the National League. But, what can we do? We lost the opening series of the season, but obviously up and up. Hopefully we can win against the Angels, win that series. Hopefully we'll win it 3-0 sweep very early, going into that Guardian series, because that'd be great for us. I believe the Brewers have the Rays, and the Rays I think are 2-1 as well. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, not an ideal start for the Cubs, but obviously that's why I was a little bit nervous going into the last week of spring training and them losing quite a few games in that last week. I was like, this is why it's concerning, because they shouldn't be losing as many games. They can lose 1 or 2 maybe, but I think they lost like 3 or 4 out of the last week, and I think they played like 6 games, I believe, in the last week, at least 5, and they lost more than they won, I believe, in that last week. So it was like, it's not great. But obviously for that, kind of a bigger week. Obviously the Giants will have the week off. Titans obviously in a Queensland Derby against the Broncos at home. Obviously Liverpool will be back in action with the FA Cup before going back the week after to Champions League football as well as Premier League. Obviously the women obviously be playing their FA Cup win their game as well. Hopefully it'll be a win for them too. But a lot of action coming back. Obviously the Wanderers will be men's team will be back. The Wanderers women's team is finished for the season, but hopefully they can avoid the wooden spoon. We'll talk about them next week as well, this weekend coming up. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man Tells 100. You guys have a great night, and of course, take care.